Karl Hermann Frank was one of the most infamous Nazi officials to operate in occupied Czechoslovakia during the Second World War. A committed Nazi, he became the face of German terror in the Protectorate of Bohemia and Moravia, modern-day Czechia, where he ruled with brutal efficiency and unleashed policies that led to mass executions, suppression of the resistance, and the destruction of entire villages. After Germany's defeat in 1945, Frank was captured and put on trial for his crimes. What made his fate particularly dramatic was the method of execution that awaited him: pole hanging, a form of execution deliberately chosen to match the cruelty he had inflicted onto others. His death was not only punishment, but a symbolic reversal of his own murderous regime. Let's find out about it. To support our channel, please make sure to subscribe. Karl Hermann Frank was born on January 24th, 1898 in Karlsbad, Bohemia, then part of the Austro-Hungarian Empire. He came from a German-speaking family in the Sudetenland, a border region of Czechoslovakia with a large ethnic German population. This identity would shape his political beliefs. After serving in World War I, he became involved in German politics. He joined the Sudeten German Party, the SDP, in the 1930s, which advocated for the rights of ethnic Germans in Czechoslovakia, but became increasingly aligned with Nazi ideology. By the late 1930s, Frank had become one of the leading voices calling for the annexation of the Sudetenland by Hitler's Germany. When the Munich Agreement of 1938 allowed Nazi Germany to annex the Sudetenland without a shot being fired, Frank's loyalty was rewarded. He quickly joined the Nazi Party and also the SS, and when Germany invaded the rest of Czechoslovakia in March 1939, he was appointed State Secretary in the new Protectorate of Bohemia and Moravia. Under the Nazi occupation, Czechoslovakia was broken into parts. Slovakia became a puppet state, while Bohemia and Moravia were placed under direct German rule. Karl Hermann Frank became the key liaison between the Reich Protector, the top German official, and the Nazi regime. Though technically second in command, Frank wielded immense power, especially when the Reich Protectors came and went. He was feared by both Czechs and Germans. Cold, ruthless, and fanatically loyal to Hitler, Frank orchestrated widespread oppression of Czech civilians. He established and oversaw martial law, mass executions, and deportations of Jews to concentration camps. He encouraged informants, silenced intellectuals, and suppressed Czech culture. One of his most brutal decisions followed the assassination of Reinhard Heydrich, the high-ranking Nazi and Frank's superior, in 1942. Heydrich, nicknamed the Butcher of Prague, was killed by Czechoslovak paratroopers trained in Britain. The German response was swift and merciless, and Karl Hermann Frank was at its core. In retaliation for Heydrich's assassination, Frank ordered the destruction of entire villages suspected of aiding the attackers. The most infamous was the Lidice massacre. On June 10, 1942, German forces surrounded Lidice, a quiet village just northwest of Prague. Frank had received false intelligence that Lidice residents were connected to the resistance. He used this as justification for a show of terror. The entire male population, 173 men, were executed on the spot. Over 200 women were sent to concentration camps, and many of the village's children were either gassed at Chelmno or were Germanized if deemed racially suitable. The village itself was burned and bulldozed. Frank ensured the area was wiped off the map as a warning to others, and this act shocked the world and became a symbol of Nazi brutality, with Frank's name forever linked to Lidice's destruction. As Nazi Germany began to crumble in 1945, Frank remained in Prague, still clinging to power. He attempted to negotiate with Czech resistance forces and even claimed to support a peaceful transfer of power, but it was all far too late. On May 9, 1945, just after Prague was liberated by Soviet forces, Karl Hermann Frank surrendered to the US Army. Despite being under American control, there was no question where he would end up. He was handed over to Czechoslovak authorities to stand trial for war crimes. In 1946, Frank was tried before a Czechoslovak People's Court in Prague. The trial was not only about bringing justice, but also allowing the Czech people to witness the fall of a man who had terrorised their country for 6 long years. Frank attempted to defend himself by downplaying his role in Nazi atrocities. He portrayed himself as a bureaucrat, following orders, and even claimed to have protected Czech civilians when possible. But the evidence against him was overwhelming. The court heard eyewitness testimonies about Lidis, mass executions, and the deportations of Czech Jews. Survivors of concentration camps and former resistance fighters described the fear Frank had instilled. German documents showed that he was not a passive administrator, but a man who signed off on murders and called for harsher measures. He was found guilty of crimes against humanity and war crimes. On May 21st, 1946, he was sentenced to death by hanging. The method chosen for Frank's execution was not ordinary hanging by a trapdoor and rope. He was to be executed by pole hanging, a method used by the Czechs during and after the war for especially loathed war criminals. It was deliberately humiliating and also painful. Pole hanging, also called short drop hanging, involved tying a noose to a fixed beam and then hoisting the condemned person up using a pulley or a ladder rather than letting them fall. It leads to death by strangulation rather than a quick neck break, often taking a number of minutes. The legs flail and the condemned dies slowly and visibly. This was the same method Frank had used on Czech resistance members during the Nazi occupation. The decision to use it on him was a symbolic one, as it was punitive. Karl Hermann Frank's execution was conducted in public in front of thousands of Czechs at Pankrak prison, where so many had been tortured and executed under his orders. The authorities wanted the public to see justice being carried out, and they wanted Frank to face the fury of the people. That morning, May 22nd, 1946, he was led out to the execution post, erected in the prison courtyard. He wore prison garb and walked with grim defiance. Czech guards tied his hands behind his back, then hoisted him onto the post and secured him in place using a chest sling. They passed ropes around the bottom of the post, and then passed the noose around the top of the post, and then placed it around Frank's neck. The executioner's assistant was the one who would control the drop. The executioner, who had secured the noose around Frank's neck, stood behind on a simple wooden step, and it was his job to force Frank's head to one side when the drop was released. The executioner's assistant released the drop, and as the rope tightened, Frank made no last words. He was hanging by his neck. There was no snap, only chokings, spasms, and the grotesque death of a man who had overseen the destruction of so many innocent lives. According to some reports at the time, the execution took over 10 minutes and was broadcast on Czechoslovak radio, and it served as a powerful moment of national closure. The execution of Karl Hermann Frank by pole hanging was more than just an act of retribution. It was a symbolic moment of justice. Frank had ruled Czechoslovakia through fear, death and ethnic hatred. His death, slow and witnessed by the people he had tried to break, sent a clear message. No dictator or war criminal would be safe after the fall of the Nazi regime. It also reflected a broader desire in post-war Europe to publicly and dramatically punish Nazi leadership. While many Nazi officials were executed by a firing squad or hanged at Nuremberg, Frank's pole hanging stood out for its national character. Czechoslovakia was reclaiming its voice by condemning one of its worst enemies in a uniquely Czech manner. Thanks for watching. To support our channel, please make sure to subscribe, and once again, thank you so much for watching.